let's imagine we are testing a web application like test.k6.io as we have in this example. So far, we have not really simulated the requests that an actual browser would make. Let me explain. I've opened up here my browser, and this is a Chrome-based browser. So this is the test.k6.io website. Typically, a website does have other elements that actually make it look like a website. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to right-click on the page, and from the drop-down menu, I'm going to select here Inspect. What you will see here at the bottom of the page is known as the Chrome Developer Tools. Essentially, every browser has this developer interface, which allows us to analyze what exactly the website is doing. Now, inside here, what we're going to see here is this Network tab. So I'm going to click on that. Okay, there are a lot of things here, but what we're going to do here, we're going to make sure that this all here is enabled. So this is, again, a filter for the kind of requests that we're going to see here. And just in case you see any requests here, click on this button here to clear any entries. All right. So it should look more or less like this. Next, I'm going to go ahead and refresh the page. So when I'm refreshing the page, what is actually happening is that the browser will go and fetch essentially the main document. This will be the HTML page. And then the HTML page will also have other resources. For example, this will be a CSS file, which essentially makes everything, the fonts and the website, look nice. There can also be some JavaScript code, which help add some dynamic things to the website. And there's also the fav icon, which is something that's being displayed by every browser right here on top. All right, so these are all requests that are happening in the background. Now, if we're looking here at our K6 script, what we're actually doing here, we're not actually opening the entire page. We're only making the first request. So we're making only this first request, but we are not simulating a request to the CSS file. We're not simulating a request to the JS file, and so on and so forth. They can also be images or any other objects within the page. So with that simple request, we're only getting the main page, the HTML, but we're not doing anything else. So this would be not really a realistic scenario. So how can we do the rest? Well, we actually have to go to see which requests are being sent. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and click here on the CSS file. This is the contents of the CSS file. So if we select here, if you right click it and select open a new tab, we're going to see the file itself, and we're going to see also the address. So all we have to do in this case is make here another request. So I'm going to use http.get, and we're going to request this CSS file. In a similar fashion, we're going to also request this JS file. So I'm going to right click it, open a new tab. We're going to see this is the JavaScript file that does some dynamic things on the website. And we're going to make an HTTP request for that as well. So I think we have enough now to get the general idea. The CSS file, the JS file, images, or anything else that is not the main document being requested is being referred to as assets, or to be more specific, static assets. Static because they do not change with every request. They're kind of like the same all the time. There's no computation or something like that involved. When requesting a main page, that's kind of like sometimes there can be some computations that are happening in the background. So there's a bit of a difference between this. In this case, we only have these two assets, but there can be pages that have many, many other assets. And this would be only one page. So if we need to go over multiple pages, things can get a bit messy. So for example, going back to the application, let's say now we also want to get something from the contacts page. So we're going to click here on contacts. So I'm going to see what's being loaded by contacts. I'm going to see here if we clear the page and refresh it, we're going to see here, okay, for the contacts, there's only the fav icon that's being requested. Let's see if we can find anything else with JavaScript, for example, news. No. Let's go here with browser. So in this case, also no. But the main idea here is, in essence, we're going to have multiple requests here. So let's start with the news page. I'm going to copy this. So we're going to have here somewhere another request. This is from a different page, the news page. Now, things in our script with so many requests can get real messy. We don't really have a logical flow and a logical way of organizing everything. Now, luckily in K6, we can use a concept which is called groups. So essentially with groups, we can organize multiple requests, for example, by pages. We can have a page which is like the main page. We can have a news page, or another way to organize things would be like by user actions, like what is necessary to perform an action. And then we have like the different kinds of requests that are associated with that action. So how do these groups work? So for example, the syntax for a group is relatively simple. So first of all, we need to import the groups, otherwise we're not going to have anything. So groups are directly part of K6. So what we have to do here is import group singular, super important. And we're going to add here a comma after the sleep. So now we have a group. So the way we create this group is essentially by invoking a function. So it's going to be the group function. And then group takes 2 parameters. That's super important to understand. So I'm just going to start here the function call so that you understand the syntax, and then we're going to get into the details. Now, the first thing that the group takes is a group name. So for example, let's say we want to create a main page and a news page. So we'll have a group here called main page. And the second argument that we'll be passing is actually a callback function. So this needs to have the function syntax. So I'm going to write here function. And then this will be essentially the function body. This is, in a nutshell, the syntax for a group. Okay, so this is what we need. I'm going to go ahead and do absolutely the same again for the news page. I'm going to write here news page. So now we have defined 2 groups. Now, this is where it's getting a bit tricky if you are still not super familiar with the JavaScript syntax. We need to put everything that we want to be part of the group in this callback function, right? So in order to do that, I'm going to go here between these 2 braces, and I'm going to hit enter. And now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to copy the code that belongs to a specific page. And I'm going to go inside here and paste it. Okay, so now you will see here that everything that belongs to the main page is inside this group function. So it starts here, it ends here, all the code needs to be here. And you will see here it's also indented, making it clear that this is part of the main page. Then if we go further down, we're going to have here the news page. And again, starting with the syntax, I'm going to hit here enter so that we have more space. And I'm going to move this request that we have here, the simple get request, and we're going to put it inside here. So this is how we can organize things in pages. But there's also the concept of subgroups. So what do I mean by subgroups? Now, essentially the idea is sometimes even within a group, there might be different kinds of requests that we're making. One typical example is this one with the static assets that we're loading. So maybe we want to have a separate group for the static assets just to make it clear what is actually a request that is being processed and what are static assets which typically have a very fast loading time, or ideally they should have a very fast loading time. So for that, we're going to use again the same syntax for a group, but this time inside here. So I'm going to write here group. I'm going to give here the name assets. And again, I'm going to have here the callback function. And I'm just going to write it final as it is right now, just to get the syntax right. And after we are sure, okay, this is the first argument that we're passing. This is the second argument. We're not getting any JavaScript errors. Then we're getting inside here, hitting enter. And then we can go ahead and move these 2 as well. These groups, you will see they are nested. This assets group is part of the main page group. And it is essentially a subgroup. You can create groups and subgroups as needed. So let's go ahead and run this to understand how it is working. So if we're taking a look at the execution report, what we're going to see here is that we're getting a few errors. So for example, check has not been added. So that's absolutely fine. We can fix that. So check is also part of K6. All we need to do is update the imports and run this once again. And now what we will see here, what is actually new from what we had before, that we're going to see here the groups. So you can see here main page, assets, we'll see which checks are part of a specific group. We're going to get this additional view here on top of the report itself. Now, just because we have groups, it doesn't mean you should abuse this group. So for example, what is generally considered an anti-pattern is that you shouldn't put a group for every request that you're sending out, right? So the idea is to encapsulate a bit more code, ideally multiple requests, but at least in this example here, it makes sense because we're grouping everything in pages. So this is the main page, and ideally the news page would also have some assets and we'll be sending also some requests. But if you're finding yourself adding a group for every request, don't do that. This is just too much boilerplate code, and actually it has very little advantages. So remember, you can ideally use tags for your requests if you need to tag the request in a specific way. And groups would be more for grouping things together, grouping code together. When you're looking here at your code, making it a bit easier to navigate through, because you're going to see, oh, this is the main page, and everything that's related to the main page is inside this code here. And then we have the news page, and everything that's related to the news page is inside there. Or alternatively, you can have groups based on different actions. For example, you can have a place order group, which encapsulates any endpoints that need to be called in order to place an order, for example. So in a nutshell, this is how you can use groups to better manage your requests.